So my name is Jocelyn Hurtado. I am the archivist at the Black Archives History and Research Foundation of South Florida. And as part of our Safer Home series, my segment is called Is It True? Tales from the Magic City. And during this session, I talk about different tales from the Magic City to see if it's based on any truth, if we can find any manuscript evidence on these tales, if we can find any supporting evidence, or sometimes we don't have the records, but it's still up in the air, but we give people more information on this topic. And today's segment I'm actually pretty excited about because I've done a lot of research on it. It's something that a new topic that I really hadn't had the opportunity to really dive into, and I think it's going to be a really great session. And just a reminder to anybody, if anybody has any questions while I talk, please feel free to drop a comment. It's really nice to see everyone. Thank you for joining. And my segment is called Is It True? That there was a female impersonation entertainment scene in Miami back in the 1960s, basically in the entertainment district of Colortown. And I'm going to dive into this particular topic, and I'm really excited because I found a lot of cool information, and I think it's something that is not really a lot of people don't talk about, and it's something that often gets overlooked with the big performance names and artists that came to Overtown. So let's get started. So as you know, in previous sessions and my other colleagues, we constantly discuss how Overtown back in the day, ever since like basically the 20s, the 30s, and 40s, 50s, and 60s, Colortown's entertainment district, which was known as Little Broadway, was lined up with clubs and lounges and bars, and it was not uncommon for big artists to pass by and perform after they would perform in the white venues, in Miami Beach. But Overtown also, had a frequent guest of different entertainers. Like last week, I talked about Nat King Cole, and this time I'm going to talk about other variety performers and entertainers. And before we start, I just want to say that June is Pride Month, and does anybody know when Pride Month was officially declared a celebration, and by which president? Which president declared June as Pride Month? I want to see if you guys know a little bit of this history. Anybody? All right, so I'm just going to give it a couple seconds. So my question was, what year was Pride Month officially declared, and by which president? Okay, so the year was 1999, and it was officially declared by President Bill Clinton. And Pride Month serves to highlight and self-promote people who identify within this community, the LGBTQ community. I know the acronyms sometimes vary. I hope I don't leave anybody out, but it was basically to promote self-awareness, increased visibility, and basically for self-affirmation with people who belong within this community. And leading into my topic about the female impersonation scene back in the day in the 1960s, Miami was no stranger to female impersonations, and I want to basically set the scene. So back in the day, there were a lot of clubs and lounges, and one of the most popular lounges was the Nightbeat at the Sir John Hotel, and this was where people went to really have a good time. There was a lot of different performers, comedians, singers, dancers, and I just want to show you a couple of the images. So these images are directly from the Clyde Killings collection that is housed at the Black Archives, and I'm just going to flip the camera around. Okay, and this was at the Nightbeat. And if you see the person in the middle, that is Mr. Clyde Killings, and he was the manager for the Nightbeat, and he was in charge of bringing in the different acts. And You know, everybody liked to have a good time. This was another club scene, and I just want you to see, like, people really love to party. This man was known as the Tiki Hut King, especially during Nassau night. There was a Tiki Hut King, and they would that night the music would be calypso, Caribbean style music, and it was really been described as a really fun place to be at. Now, heading back, so all right. So the reason I chose this topic because I first piqued my curiosity while I was in the archives and I was looking at this collection, and I noticed that there were some of the performers, you know, there were not big names, and I also found some supporting documents that basically said this is the group is called the Hurricane Boys, and this was a female impersonation group. And I'm just like, oh my god, I didn't know female impersonation performance happened. Nowadays we call that drag performances. And we actually, part of the Clyde Killings collection, we have lobby cards. Lobby cards were used to promote some of the upcoming acts that were going to perform at that time in one of the several clubs and lounges that was managed by Clyde Killings. And one of the lobby cards that we have at the Black Archives is of the Hurricane Boys. So let me just pull up that photo. Give me 1 second. So I'm going to flip it so you guys can see it. Give me 1 second. And this is the Hurricane Boys. Clyde Killings Hurricane Boys Halloween Masquerade Ball and Show tonight. And the admission was $2. So these are actually all men dressed up in either female characters, and they would perform different acts. So I'm just going to do a close zoom in. And we also have, give me 1 second. We also have a couple other photos. So this was the Hurricane Boys on a parade float. And this was a parade that was going down in Colortown. And as you can see, there seems to be around 8 members of the Hurricane Boys, and they're going to perform at the Nightbeat. It's a show and dance show, and they have their own float. Unfortunately, we don't have the names of these individuals, but if anybody knows anything about this group, please feel free to send and contact the Black Archive if you have any information. We're always constantly looking to build up to our collection. And then I also want to show you this other picture. So this was members of the Hurricane Boy during a performance. And as you can see, they wore their different costumes. And it was at the Nightbeat. And the reason that we know it's at the Nightbeat is because the shiny curtain that's in the back, we were able to identify that as a signature piece of the Nightbeat due to various photos. All right. And let me just bring it back to myself. And all right, thank you. All right, and before I really start getting to talking about the other performers, I really want to talk about, you know, June is Pride Month, and some of the activists, well-known activists, that basically started this movement and really brought a light to this movement. And basically, the leading founder and the founder of Pride Month and Pride activist is Marsha P Davis. Marsha P Davis is an American gay liberation activist who self-identified as a drag queen, and she is well known for her involvement in the Stonewall uprising. It sometimes is referred as to the Stonewall riots, which happened in 1969, and that's when basically the police raided the Stonewall bar, which was located in the Greenwich Village in Manhattan, New York, and they started arresting members of the LGBTQ community. And basically the story goes was that the police were used to receiving kickbacks, financial kickbacks. They would blackmail some of the patrons who visit these locales in order to prevent them from, raiding the place and getting arrested. But when they did not receive their kickbacks, they actually, raided the Stonewall bar, and that's basically when that community decided enough was enough, and they started pushing back and fighting back for their rights. And it's a very interesting story. The riots lasted 2 days, but the marches continue so much time afterwards. And Marsha P Davis basically is the person who pushed for basically gay rights for everybody and made this be a national forefront issue. And this event is considered the leading event in the gay liberation movement. And another interesting fact about Marsha P Davis was she was a founding member of START, the Street Transvestite Action Revolution. And it basically promoted equality and rights for people who identified as trans. And while I started doing this research, I really wanted to be careful how I used my pronouns, the terms, to make sure I was not misidentifying, stating anything. So there is a difference between drag performance and being transvestite or trans. And for drag performance, it's usually when a person dresses in their opposite sex and they dress up in a more exaggerated version of that, but it's mostly due to a performance, whereas trans person is what they identified, and it sometimes is not as the same biological sex that they were born with. So it's a lot of interesting terms and a lot of educational research I was able to do, and I really encourage everybody to do their research. It's super informative, and it really highlights in this community that sometimes it's really well overlooked. So that also led me to see, what did Marsha P. Johnson identify? And actually, Marsha P. Johnson identified as a drag queen, as gay, and as a trans. Back in the day, they didn't have as many terms as they have now. So a lot of people would now consider that as just gender nonconforming. But back in those days, in the 1960s, that wasn't a term. That wasn't a term that was used or even known or that was coined. And Marsha P. Davis was actually part of a drag performance group called the Hot Peaches. So she was a drag queen, but she didn't consider herself a high-end drag queen, like, some of what people typically think of the really elaborate costumes, with the elaborate makeup and things like that. And that was just because affordability. So those costumes and makeup cost a lot of money, but she still did dress up in drag. And I know I'm spending a lot of time on Marsha P. Davis, but I think it's well deserved because she was really an amazing person and what she did in her activism. And I just want to see what you guys know about her. Does anybody know what the P in Marsha P. Davis stands for? It's pretty interesting, and it's actually pretty funny. Does anybody know what the P in Marsha P. Davis stood for? Okay, just gonna give it a couple of seconds. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. The P in Marsha P. Davis stood for pay it no mind. And it was because when people would ask her what her gender was, she would just say, pay no mind. And interesting enough, because of her activism and because of that, during those time, she did have a lot of contacts with the police. And one time she did get arrested, and she was appearing before the judge. And the judge asked her that, what's your gender? And she said, pay it no mind. That's what the P stands for, Marsha P. Davis. And he actually found that quite funny and actually dropped the charges and let it go. So that was a pretty funny little story that I actually read. And I really encourage you guys to read more about Marsha P. Davis because she was really great activist in the gay liberation movement and also in the AIDS movement. In 1972, she established the Star House, which was a shelter for gay and trans kids, and she provided housing, and she was known as Mama Drag, and she was basically the mother of these kids, and she would do anything that she can to help them out. So with this, I'm going to just transition into talking specifically about the female impersonation scene in the 1960s here in Miami. But I just wanted to tell you a little story about Marsha P Davis because she was such a pivotal role. And I encourage you people to, look up information on the Stonewall Uprising. They have really great documentaries and a really great digital archive. So I would just really encourage you to look it up. And from now, I'm going to talk about the Overtown night scene back in the 60s. So getting back to that. Okay. So like I said earlier, Clyde Killings was known as Mr. Entertainment back in the day. He was in charge in contracting and bringing the entertainment acts to the Overtown night scenes. He was also the manager of the Nightbeat Hotel, and he also actually owned and operated the Harlem Square Club. So he was known as Mr. Entertainment. And Mr. Clyde Killings, I know I'm going to go a little bit into more detail about him, but Mr. Clyde Killings was actually native of Georgia. He arrived in South Florida in 1924. He was always in the entertainment district, in the entertainment scene. His father actually played for a band. His stepfather actually played for a band. He would travel around with him, and that's how he basically ended up in South Florida. And his first job in Overtown was actually as being the drummer for the silent movies. I read different articles that stated that he was a drummer for the Lyric Theater, and also there was another article that said it was for the Wometco Theater. So there's kind of a discrepancy between the two theater, but the point is he was a drummer for the silent movies, and he was responsible for bringing some of the most attracted acts back in the day, such as Count Basie, Sam Cooke, Josephine Baker, Dionne Warwick, and just a variety entertainment, including female impersonation groups, also now known as drag performance. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm putting my page. And one of them was being the Hurricane Boys, which we discussed earlier. And it was not a common thing for half female impersonations as an act. They were part of the Chitlin Circuit. And the Chitlin Circuit was a collection of performance venues throughout the eastern, southern, and upper Midwest United States, which was it was for, produced, and in black neighborhoods and black venues. So this was an entertainment performance venues that were created and brought acts for black patrons and were created by black patrons, because due to Jim Crow laws, black patrons were not allowed to go to white theaters, bars, shows, or anything like that. So this was basically created out of necessity, but stayed because it was good. It was popular. And it was more popular. It was started between the 1920s, and then it stayed popular all the way to the mid-1960s when the Civil Rights Act happened and integration. Okay. And in the Chitlin Circus, there were variety amounts of female impersonations acts, and one of the most famous ones was Billy Wright, who started out as the female impersonation in Atlanta. And by the mid-1940s, Billy Wright actually transitioned to an R&B singer, and he was known for his very colorful clothing. And he was actually a mentor to Little Richard. He actually helped him secure his first recording session with RCA in 1951, and he was known as the tent show queen. So right now, I'm going to flip my camera and show you Billy Wright. So if you give me 1 second. I have so many windows open. Okay. Oh, yes. So, I forgot to show you a picture of Marsha P Davis. Marsha P Johnson, and I'm just going to show you that first, and then I'm going to show you a image of Billy Wright. So give me 1 second. Okay, so this was Marsha P Johnson, who was the co-founder of the gay liberation movement, and she was known for wearing crowns, flower crowns, and that was because she would pick out flowers that were not sold on the streets, and she would make her own flower crowns. And this is Billy Wright, and if you look at his hairstyle and if you look at his dress, you can kind of resemble Little Richard's style. And all right, so now I'm gonna flip the camera over. Give me 1 second. Okay, so this led me to do a lot of history of what the female impersonation scene was like in the 50s and 60s and how it started. And this actually led me to another well-known female impersonator known as Esquerita, whose real name was S.Q. Reader Jr. He was another really well-known female impersonator that inspired the piano style of Little Richard. And he was also, okay, so I wanted to show you this because while I was researching him, I actually found an article that referenced him as Hurricane Esquerita, and that got me really excited because I was like, oh my god, imagine if he's one of the Hurricane Boys, because it's such a difficult name to research, particular to that group, because as you know, hurricane is not an uncommon term, and especially in South Florida and Miami, we get a lot of hurricanes, and it just so happens the University of Miami team is known as the Hurricanes. So it was not really easy to find that information because I just saw a lot of newspapers consisting with sports or just actual natural disaster. So I for a moment I did thought that, you know, maybe there was a correlation between Esquerita, because he was referenced as Hurricane Esquerita, and the Hurricane Boys, but unfortunately I did not find that connecting piece of evidence. And you know, this is what research is all about. Sometimes you might have a lead, sometimes you might have a hunch, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can support it without evidence. So I still haven't found that connection piece of evidence, but I did find this, which is going to lead me back to South Florida. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna pull it up. Okay. So I did find this poster, which actually shows, it's actually a poster highlighting Billy Wright. It says A&G Restaurant and Lounge in Georgia Avenue proudly presents all-female impersonator show and dance and pre-Halloween ball. So if you remember when I talked about the Hurricane Boys and Clyde Killings lobby cards, the show that they were performing was actually a Halloween ball as well. So, you know, here are two instances where female impersonation in shows were actually happening on Halloween. Maybe that was a thing or not, but, you know, we do have two supporting documents that show, you know, during Halloween, female impersonation did occur. And here you see, you know, this was a little bit later on. This was actually published in 1977. But if you look at the names, it says Princess Rudine, Sharon Strip Dancer, Big Mama, Whole Lot of Shaking, Madame Kilroy, and the Sensations, and then the MC, Billy Wright. So I just wanted to pay attention to the name, especially Princess Rudine, because this led me to take a closer look at some of the other lobby cards that we have in our collection. And this is when I notice this. Okay, this is another lobby cards that we have in their collection. So our Clyde Killings lobby card collection, we have over 100 billboards, 100 lobby cards, and one of them was this. It says Pa Kelly, the Quevettes, Princess Paula Pretty, Jay Gilmore, and Wildman Steve. So if you, I'm trying to see if maybe this is going by the order of appearance and that's how they put the pictures. So we have Paul Kelly, the Quevettes, which will make sense for a group, Princess Paula Pretty. I'm not sure if that's a male or female, and I don't want to make any assumption, but you know, I did notice when they were promoting a lot of female impersonation groups, they either would go with Mrs. or Madam, a princess or queen to like as a moniker for female impersonation. So, you know, perhaps if somebody knows anything more about the Princess Paula Pretty act, maybe can fill me in a little bit more information about that. I found that super interesting. So maybe this is another female impersonation that came here to South Florida to Colortown and perform. And you know, this performance happened on a Saturday night. The price was $150, and the one lucky lady in the audience holding a ticket was going to receive a free mink stole. So I thought that pretty interesting as well. So now I'm going to flip over. Give me 1 second. All right, and this is going to lead me to one of the most the female impersonator that I found the most information on, which was Jimmy Chicky Horn. So Jimmy Chicky Horn was a frequent performer here, not only in Overtown, Colortown, but also in Brownsville in the Hampton House. And this is a person that we have, I found the most information. And at the Black Archives, we do have, I believe, one lobby card announcing Chicky Horn's performance. It's currently up in our green room, actually. This is where we have our comedians who are going to perform in our Glass House comedy nights. They sit there to wait for their performance, and then in that room we actually have one of the lobby cards, which is pretty cool and interesting because it's just tying it back to, you know, like, you know, comedy now and day. And I actually found a lot of information, a lot of announcement related to Chicky Horn. And give me 1 second, I'm just going to start pulling up the information. So a lot of this information that I'm pulling up is actually from newspaper ads, particularly the Miami Herald. And the dates range from the early 60s to the mid 60s. And give me 1 second, I'm just going to start pulling it up. Okay. And let me just pull up my information on Chicky Horn. Okay. So Chicky Horn performed as Hazel Horn, and she also performed as Madam Effie Throckbottom. And she actually produced a comedy album, which I found the cover to online, but I haven't been able to locate or track down to see how much it's worth. It seems like it's really rare, and I couldn't find you know, the price for it or even the audio for it. But I'm definitely gonna keep my eye out for it because I really want to listen to Chicky Horn's performance. And let me just pull it out. Give me 1 second. Okay, so give me 1 second. Let me just. Okay. So this is the vinyl. I'm gonna flip it. Give me 1 second. All right, so this is the vinyl for Mr. Chicky Horn presents Madam Effie Throckbottom. And there you have Chicky Horn in different get-ups. And interesting enough, Chicky Horn actually inspired Flip Wilson's Geraldine. And I actually found this reading in, give me 1 second, called, so this is, okay, this is Geraldine, Flip Wilson's Geraldine, female comedy. Female impersonation character, and it was actually stated that he directly inspired Flip Wilson. And there is a reading that I actually found by somebody who was in the entertainment line of work during that era. And let me see if I can pull it up and it can just give you a direct quote. I just had it right now. Give me 1 second. No. Okay, so this reading is called Faith in Time, The Life of Jimmy Scott. And this is an autobiography. And during his book, he actually mentions Jimmy Chicky Horn, who performed as Hazel Horn. That's where Philip Wilson got his character, Geraldine, from. Chicky was the best act out there. I saw him at the Victory Club, and later when I went on the road, I took him with me. He called me Big Sis. And it keeps on talking about how Chicky, his performance and how he was, and it also actually dives into Chicky's personal life, which I'm not really going to get into, but I'm going to post the picture of the book if anybody is interested in reading and learning more about that entertainment scene. But it basically states that during that time, the Chitlin Circuit and entertainment venue actually provided it provided refuge and a safe space for people to express whatever they want to express and perform however they wanted to perform. And a lot of these people in the entertainment district, according to this person who was part of the entertainment district, says came from broken homes. They were looking for new family, and that family was other performers. And it basically goes into, talks a little bit more personal about how was Chicky Horn, how was his performance, and how other performers viewed Chicky. So I would definitely recommend it. And I'm actually going to start pulling some of the newspaper articles that advertise Chicky's performance. Sorry about that. So I'm going to flip over right now. So this is a newspaper article that I found from the Miami Herald dated April 10th, 1964. And it says, Madam Effie Throckbottom and Chicky Horn, which was one and the same person, was coming to Clyde Killings Nightbeat. And also Roy Hamilton was coming that day. And then you also have another advertisement for Chicky Horn in 1963. He was also performing, it says, held over Chicky Horn, Madam Effie Throckbottom was performing at the Nightbeat as well. And then we also have it at, Chicky was performing at the Hampton Club. And it says, the Fabulous Flamingos, Roulette Recording Stars, Young MC, Chicky Horn, 3 shows nightly. And it says New Year's Eve show starring Jimmy Rushing. You can make reservations. And this was at the Hampton House that's located in Brownsville. This is another advertisement. Chicky Horn was the MC. And I also found Chicky Horn performing in different venues throughout South Florida. It was not only consisted to the Hampton House and Nightbeat. There was also this place called Rancher, and it says they had different performers as well. And we also have Chicky Horn, who was performing the same night as Etta James on the same show rotation as Etta James, which was August 7th, 8th, and 9th of 1964. So I thought it was pretty cool. So here you have it. Then you have at the Mr. James Club, which was another nightclub, which was located 3615 Northwest 2nd Avenue. You have also added attraction Chicky Horn, and you also had Billy Miranda and his Royal Sheiks. And here was another one with, we already have Chicky Horn on the same show rotation as Etta James, and now we have Chicky Horn also in the same show rotation as Aretha Franklin, and this is in 1962, so years prior to that. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well. And we have, again, Chicky Horn at the Mr. James Club. Does anybody know anything about the Mr. James Club? Because this is the first time I came across this club. And I really haven't seen, or up until this point, seen any information on Mr. James Club. But I'm going to probably do a little bit more in research on that. All right. So we have a lot of different newspaper articles I was able to find. And see. So I am, so this is basically closing out this session. So my segment today, is it true that there was a female impersonation entertainment scene back in the day in Miami in the 1960s and 50s? And basically, yes, there was a female impersonation scene. It was a really popular type of entertainment in the Chitlin circuit, and the Chitlin circuit was a performance venues throughout the South, the Eastern, the Midwest United States, that were Black performance venue that produced Black entertainment for Black audience. And part of that was the female impersonation shows. And here in South Florida, we at the Black Archives, we actually have a couple of images and information on a couple of them that specifically visit to the Overtown location. One of the groups being the Hurricane Boys, which perform at the Nightbeat. And we also have information on Cheeky Horn. And there's also information on people who might be female impersonation, like Princess Paula Pretty. And then we also have people who are part of that circuit route that not necessarily went to the United States, but actually, they have more well-recorded history. So the story is true. And if you have any comments or would like more information, please feel free to comment. I'm going to be here for like 1 or 2 more minutes to see if anybody have any comments or would like to add on to this conversation. Please feel free to do so. So I'm definitely going to continue researching this topic just because I think it's really interesting and something that's not as well researched or talked about. Sorry about that. Oh, I'm hoping it doesn't fall. But does anybody have any questions or anything? Please feel free to drop a comment. I'm going to be here for like 1 or 2 minutes. But yes. Let me see if I have any more photos. And then I'm actually, before I go, I'm just going to give you a quick recap of some of the photos so you guys can just take a quick look at it. Alright, let me just flip it over. Oops, sorry. So, this was, sorry that it's not zooming in that well, but this was the Hurricane Boys. Give me a second, I'm gonna flip it and then flip out. Okay, there we go. We have the Hurricane Boys performing. This was them on the float. This was also the Hurricane Boys doing the limbo dance. This is the lobby card that we have at the Black Archives announcing the Hurricane Boys performance. The admission was $2. All right. We also have the other lobby card, which I discussed earlier, Princess Paula Pretty. And let me just, so many photos. And these are some of the newspaper articles that I found. So since nobody has any questions at the moment, I'm going to sign off. Thank you guys for joining. I really enjoyed talking about this topic and doing research on it. Tune in for tomorrow's segment, Today in Black Miami, with the Alicia Melton, the Community Outreach Archivist. We also have Wednesday, we have Jeopardy Noir with the Executive Director. Thursday, I believe we're going to do kind of a little change up on that. So we're going to make an announcement pretty soon on normally his legacies, profile, and greatness. And on Friday, it is a holiday weekend, so we might have a day off, And but just tune in. We're going to continue doing our Safer at Home series. Please stay safe, wash your hands, don't touch anything, wear a mask. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment once this video is posted online. Thank you. Have a good day.